Message was, he was talking just previously about sitting in a blank quietude, mistaking that for emptiness. And some people think this is a great achievement when they're able to dull or stop the mind thinking completely, and he says this is really wrong, it's misleading. Now I think we're on the next passage here. So he says, good and wise friends, the capacity of the mind is great and far-reaching and encompasses the Dharma realm. When functioning, it is clear and distinct, discerning and responsive. It knows all. All is the one mind, and the one mind is all. Things naturally come and go, but the essence of the mind is unimpeded. That is prajna. So maybe we can use this as an entry point to talk a little bit about the concept of emptiness. Of course, there's, as my teacher used to say, if we talked it in detail, we'd never finish in one night or a week. But I want to go into it a little bit. First thing to point out is the chapter is entitled Prajna, okay, wisdom. And we talked about this. And then you see, he goes on page 23, and he says, this prajna is whole and complete in everyone. It's not different in the foolish and the wise, except the wise are aware of it and know how to use it, and the foolish are unaware and don't know how to use it. But it's essentially the same. Then he says people chant prajna all day long or talk about prajna all day long, of their essential nature. This, in other words, the prajna is something that manifests out of your being. It's not something out there. So this prajna, and then he says, just as talking about food won't satisfy hunger, so talking about emptiness is ultimate no benefit. So here we have an interesting transition. He goes from prajna, and then he says chanting about prajna, then he says chanting about emptiness. So, to me, the conclusion of this would be somehow there's a real clear link between prajna and emptiness. They seem to be even one and the same. He just shifts it right there and goes from prajna to emptiness. And this is where sometimes we get a little confused. We say, well, prajna was this wonderful, beautiful quality of wisdom, and now he's talking about this negative thing called emptiness. And actually, what I'm trying to bring out maybe tonight in an incomplete, awkward way, is that the concept of prajna as emptiness is totally right on, and that within this tradition, this wisdom tradition, emptiness is pretty much altogether a positive concept. Okay? So I'm saying it's altogether, almost exclusively, I can't think of a way possibly it's used as a negative term within this Buddhist tradition. So people have tried to come up with other translations for this. Sometimes it's in the Chinese it can be wu or kung, or in Sanskrit sunya or sunyata, but nobody's been able to come up with one single English word that can convey all the richness of this without using some kind of concept of the absence or empty or whatever. At least I haven't seen one. So let's go into that, why it's altogether a positive concept, and then maybe look at some of the ways we've come to associate emptiness in a negative way. And I don't know if this is shared by all of you, but we went through a little exercise, a brainstorm session a couple classes ago when everybody sort of weighed in on what you think of with emptiness. And it wasn't a winning list. It was pretty negative and down to the point of depressing. But I was surprised how rich you were in your vocabulary for negative terms. So let's look at this a little bit. There's a 3rd century Buddhist teacher, sort of a Buddhist philosopher teacher, sage, called Nagarjuna. And he once made a statement. He says, emptiness wrongly grasped is like picking up a poisonous snake by the wrong end. Emptiness, wrongly apprehended, grasp, is like picking up a poisonous snake from the wrong end. Okay, so what's the wrong end? Good, I just want to be clear. since most of us don't pick up poisonous snakes, right, if you pick it up by the head, you're going to get bit. You reach for the head, so you try to pick it up from the tail. Okay? Right. Or you could say, well, you try to pick it up from the head to avoid. But his idea is, if you pick it up from the wrong end, it's going to bite you. Okay? So however you interpret, you say, well, you pick it up from the head, and therefore it can't bite you, you pick it up from the tail. But I've sort of seen people picking it up from the tail. When I watch snake people, if they have a clamp thing, they try to get the head. But if they're doing it with their hands, they pick it up from the tail. Okay, don't dwell on this. Just get the idea. Okay? It means to compare it to a poisonous snake means if you wrongly understand it or if you misunderstand it, you could really quickly go bad in your understanding and cultivation and go down a wrong road. So, in a sense, the most common, I think, association with it is something like this nothing or this absence, emptiness. It indicates both a lack of importance, a lack of interest. It doesn't compel any interest. It could be a lack of value even. It's worthless. And a lack of relevance or significant. All of this is conveyed in the negative notion of emptiness. I'm just going through our list before. It can be a state of nothing, or it can be a total void, the non-existence of anything whatsoever. Or something lacking. It's often used with worthless and meaningless and so forth. Now, the Buddhist concept almost means the exact opposite, even though the word in English is the same. So that's why we have to switch gears and try to get around it. If we understand it as something closer to fullness, I'm just using some words here, or spaciousness, or boundlessness, or, and I would say in the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, this sort of uninhibited, unrestrained, full functioning of the nature that he says here from the passage we just read. It encompasses, its capacity is mind and great and far-reaching. See, that's the capaciousness, the boundlessness of it. It encompasses the Dharma realm. It contains all phenomena. The Dharma realm mean the 10 paths of existence are all coming forth from this mind or this nature. So that's what it means. It's vast, it's interconnecting, it includes everything. It's the matrix. You could call it Tathagata Garbha, the essential nature, the Buddha nature. It's talking about the same thing. But it's a very positive, expansive terminology. So that's why in the passage on page 24 you see, he then compares it to empty space. Okay, now, empty space in the way we might think of it is to be void and dark, right? So you've seen these movies where some astronaut goes out there. I don't know, I haven't seen the latest one where some starlet goes out there and she loses connection with her. Okay, yeah, you guys, so am I right in conveying that empty space is like this hole that just sucks you up, right? Okay, good. I haven't seen it, but I just got, what do you call it, trailers. I saw a trailer for it, okay. My life is full of trailers. And so the image of empty space then is this dark, deep abyss or void that you could just be lost into. But here, when the passage on page 24 is used, he says empty space has this capacity to hold everything. So instead of seeing it as an empty void, it is the container without boundaries, if you will, of everything. So it's rich in the sense that it is open to, containing, holding everything. And therefore it's a positive connotation as opposed to a void.
I'm surprised they don't use the word openness.
And openness could be translated as emptiness. And later the Sixth Patriarch does use something similar to that.
When you think of an open meadow where you're able to see the whole, after being maybe in the forest for a while.
The psychological effect is openness. You see, when you're in that state, and I'll read later, the passage suggests when you're in the state of being in touch with essential nature, your affective mode is openness and relaxed. Because you're within a grasp of everything and not rejecting anything. So empty space, it said, is able to contain everything, yet not pushing anything out. So that openness is a positive concept, connotation. Anyhow, so we go back. By looking at that parallel on the open empty space on page 24, then when he goes to 25, you see him filling in. He says, just like that, our mind is great, like empty space, able to contain the 10,000 things and so forth. So, where to start? Let's start with Genesis. I was kind of a joke, but in the beginning, everybody know Genesis? Nobody know Genesis?
The Bible.
It's from the Bible. Thank you. It's, as my niece would call it, the Holly Bible. Well, she was brought up in a really secular training with my sister, never read any religious works because they didn't believe in that sort of thing, but then she went to the elementary school in California and noticed a reference to this Holybible, and since she had never grown up with the concept of sacred or holy, she translated it. She says, "What's the Holly Bible?" Thinking it was some magical plant. Okay, so it's called the Holy Bible, those. And Genesis is the first chapter of the Holy Bible, right? And it talks about the creation of the world, the creation of the universe, the creation of human beings. And if I'm going to use the King James Version, which I like, it says, in the beginning, okay, meaning before anything, in the beginning, earth was formless. Another Buddhist word, by the way. There's the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realm. And again, here, formless in this Buddhist sense is positive, but here, formless means there ain't nothing. It was formless and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So, formless, void, dark is the first image we have. So this is idea of a void and vacant condition. And then into that, God generates the creation, which is light and water and the plants and everything. And so from this void vacancy, we get all this wonderful stuff. So the image then, I'm not going to talk about how this whole thing works or whatnot. I'm not even going to try to go there. I'm just saying that in the image of this, emptiness is associated with that which is beginning before creation. It's void, it's vacant, it's empty. It's lacking. It's chaos, if you want. Dark, ultimate chaos. It's where that astronaut just disappeared into. So that's one section. And for a lot of people, this image of the void or vacant or empty or dark is coming from this religious literary tradition that we're more Westerners are heir to, but it's kind of around universally. And so that's why that association with emptiness could come with a negative connotation from that. And, sometimes in the classroom you do it. When I went to religious school of this tradition, we would all be really, really quiet. And we'd close our eyes and the lights would go out in the classroom. And the teacher would say, in the beginning, it was void and dark. And then, open your eyes, turn on the lights, everybody sing. And then it was like, that's a creation. Hallelujah. So the image of that was previously the void, the emptiness was not where you wanted to be. You wanted to be in the playground of creation, which was a lot of light and fun. And so that's the first image. Let me do another passage for you. Some of you, this also is from the Bible. Now, let me be fair. I'm not trying to go into some really deep consideration tonight of the Western philosophical treatment of emptiness, because it's as rich, I think, as a Buddhist tradition, and I can't do service to it. What I'm trying to bring out is, although some Western philosophers have wrestled with and tried to make this empty void into something positive, the overarching sense that we have is just, in our ordinary understanding, is void and emptiness are negative, not positive. So even if the existentialists try to turn it into something more positive, it still has an aspect to it that when one hears it, you feel a kind of sense of,
So, Marty,
yes?
why in the translations did they use emptiness then, if it was such a loaded word?
this is a very good question. It could be that that is so close to what it means in the original language, but not the original spirit of the philosophy. So to substitute another word, you'd probably have to do a couple of words. More, I have a sense, but this is not definitive. My sense is it stops you. Psychologically, effectively, it stops you. And you're saying, okay, empty space, it's wonderful, it's full, it's got all these wonderful meanings. Why do I have this reaction? And what it's doing is pointing to sort of the psychological dynamic effect of getting to see that you are holding on and attaching and grasping and wanting something rather than appreciating your innate fullness. And so sometimes I think the language is kept to cause a reaction of awareness. Because if you said everything's full, whole, and complete, you might go, oh yeah. And you just pass into not doing anything. So the idea of emptiness provokes you into confronting the nature of existence. That's a psychological interpretation. But I don't think there's an easy word in English to capture this. And you'd have to, I'll give you passages tonight from the tradition of this, where it comes from, and you can see, obviously it's very, very positive, but it's also done in a playful way, used in a playful way to sort of challenge your attachments. So, openness, why not? Maybe at the end of tonight we'll come up with a new English word that gets it with all its fullness. I don't know if we can. If it conveys at all, how should I say this? Depression, loneliness, emptiness, hollowness, lacking, we've missed it. So when you read the Buddhist teachings here, if that feeling comes up, realize that we're not getting at its real meaning, okay? So I'm saying philosophically, don't see it as nothing whatsoever, and psychologically, don't allow yourself to see, oh, I'm a good Buddhist because I'm really depressed. I feel hollow and empty. Life sucks. Wow, I'm really close to the fundamental emptiness. Psychologically, you're way off, okay? So just realize that that's not a correct interpretation.
Yeah. So when we, I don't know, when we get ourselves emotionally or mentally there, how do we turn that around?
So the question is, when we get ourselves emotionally where? Into the fullness of life and it's,
In a moment.
oh, the emptiness.
Yeah.
And the question is?
How do we turn that around?
TV. A trip to the mall. Shopping spree. A good beer. No, I'm joking, okay? Don't self-medicate. Because much of the attempt, the Lotus Sutra says what we do, actually the closest Buddhist term to what that is dukkha. So if you think of what dukkha means, that's closer to depressed, hollow, meaningless, whatnot. So the unawakened mind sees reality through a lens of delusion, misperception that's called dukkha, and interprets reality or life as suffering or unsatisfactory. Okay? So actually the Buddhist concept of dukkha is closer to the Western concept of emptiness, meaningless, hollow. Okay? So then you have to call a spade a spade. You call it what it is. So sometimes it comes about through a misunderstanding of the concept. Okay, so you're trying to be a good Buddhist, and you think to be a good Buddhist is to dwell in emptiness, which is depressing, hollow, meaningless, blah, 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 right? So then all you have to do is counter it with the teachings, and you'll come out of it really quickly. You just realize you misread the term. However, if you're in a psychological state of hollow, empty, depressed, and whatnot, and it doesn't come from reading Buddhist text, then you have a number of choices. And the Buddha mapped these out. He said, well, you can try to get out of there by eat, drink, and be merry, but that won't work because that's what the Lotus Sutra says, trying to end suffering by using suffering. It doesn't work. Okay? Or you can find various means of escape, denial, blah, 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 right? Or you can look at it sort of saying, all the great sages and cultivators began their path of cultivation partly pushed along by that feeling of noticing that things were, from the unawakened mind, empty, hollow, meaningless, and whatnot. And so it's actually a spur to cultivation. You see what I'm saying? Because it's the beginning of letting go of what's false. So sometimes dukkha becomes a catalyst for cultivation. Not an end, but a catalyst because it's making you aware of how you're caught up in and attaching to things that are ultimately insubstantial, impermanent, and passing. So it can be a spur. Now, if you dwell on it for a long time, it becomes an illness, right? And so, but there's nothing essentially in the teachings, I want to be clear about this, there's nothing in the teachings that should lead you to despair, loneliness, emptiness, hollowness, and meaninglessness. That is not Buddhism. Now, can that occur in your cultivation? Certainly. But it's an awakening moment where you start to see everything you're hanging on to is that way. And then the letting go is the emptiness, which is the fullness. You see? Okay.
When does it switch from emptiness to fullness?
When you let go.
Okay.
It's not a pill. I wish I could have a pill here. There's no pill. Okay. So the next passage I was going to read is from something called Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a pretty cool book, actually. I really like it. There's a song, a folk song that Hung Sure and I used to sing based on Ecclesiastes called For Everything There's a Season, Turn, and a Time for Everything Under Heaven. It's really wonderful. This is not that passage. This is a little more dour. And this is from the passage All is Vanity. So if you've never heard it before, and it's King James Version, bear with me if English is not your first, even if it is your first language, it's a little tough to parse. So it says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem, he says this, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Meaning, vanity means what? It's not what you sit in front of and comb your hair and everything. That's a vanity.
Self-important.
Vanity means, really, the ancient meaning means empty. Vain, meaning empty, hollow, meaningless. But it can also mean vanity in the sense of undeserved pride. Now he explains this. What does a person gain by all the toil? Now here, of course, it's agriculture. But you could translate this to business, to shopping, to investments, to whatever your job is. All the toil at which he toils under the sun. A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. It's kind of a samsaric description, right? You get up, you go to work, you go to bed, you get up, you go to work, run a comb through your head, you go to bed, do the Beatles here. But, it's just going on and on and on like this. What does that mean? He says, it's vanity of vanity. The wind blows to the south, it goes around to the north, around and around goes the wind, and on its circuit the winds return. The winds return, the seasons return, our troubles return, our day goes in these meaningless cycles. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. Okay? Just on and on. All things are full of weariness. Now, see, this is not Buddhist, I'm telling you this. Okay? This is Ecclesiastes. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. Now it's talking about the restlessness come from seeing the passing of everything. So when you have this restlessness, the urge is to then grab and get and fill the sense of the void. But the eye can't be filled with seeing, the ear can't be filled with hearing, the hands can't be filled by taking. You could extend this metaphor. What has been is what will be. Whoops. Meaning repetition. Repetition. And what has been done is what will be done. Wars will go on. People will gain profit and lose it. Will be born only to die. And there's nothing new under the sun. This is one of the famous lines. Okay? Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So he says, vanity is vanity. And he says, it's the unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with this vanity, this hollowness. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, striving after a wind. Trying to get a wind that you can't get. So this is, now the Hebrew word for this vanity really translates better as mist or vapor or mere breath. Okay? Meaning it's fleeting and elusive. So what this is getting at is it's just describing human life as this passing vapor or breath. And it's brief and beyond our control. You could take, who's the name? Hobbes? You know Hobbes? Not Calvin and Hobbes. Yeah, sorry, the other Hobbes. He says, life is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. It's the same sort of expression here. It just goes on. Life is a vapor because the world goes on unchanged, yet in the midst of this, everything changes and we change, and yet in spite of all our frantic activities, there's nothing we can do it. It just slips through our fingers. And when we try to grasp them, and through our minds when we try to grasp it and understand it, we can't get at it. And nothing lasts, yet everything seems to stay the same, and basically we're born only to die. And we have no control over that, or the future. Whew, that'd be heavy, okay? But this is coming out of Ecclesiastes. This is meant to be a contemplation given to people to change their attachment to the world and tie into something deeply spiritual. But it is a description of emptiness, meaninglessness at the core. So you could see from these kinds of passages how the word emptiness, in our sense of using it here, might get us going down the wrong road to the Buddhist meaning because of the English connotation.
And these have also colored how people interpret the Indian philosophy and their terms.
Say more.
Oh, these Christian notions are completely entrapping, I think, the way that people understand Eastern traditions.
Everybody following what she's saying? She's saying, if I can repeat, she's saying these notions of emptiness, these notions of the void, of sunyata, not only interpret our particular misunderstanding of that term in Buddhism, but she's saying the whole of Indian philosophy and spirituality is misunderstood or misrepresented through that lens. So we take our familiar notions from poetry and our religion about emptiness, and then we look at Indian philosophy, where Buddhism emerged, at least in this time, and we look at its spread and we say, aha, wow, it's nihilistic, it's negative, its goal is voidness, it's life-denying, and so on and so forth. And it's all because that understanding of it is colored by this. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is not my point. I'm not putting this forward to say, oh, the Bible's this or that. I'm pointing forward just to say our sort of literary, psychological background is framed by this, and so those words convey that, okay?
I don't find the inconsistency. I mean, I don't find it to be inconsistent. I mean, I think it's a preface. I find the Ecclesiastes passage to almost be very parallel to the Buddhist notion of trying to grasp onto things that are ephemeral and
But see,
and
right.
As a preface to, you know, if you read on, probably digging deeper and discovering that really it's about trying to find a more spiritual, deeper meaning in things, which I think is something you touched on.
Right. The only thing I would be pointing out is that this passage of Ecclesiastes in all language is a beautiful passage of the description of dukkha. Okay? And so, but the language is empty, hollow, vanity, which then people would associate emptiness in Buddhism with dukkha. So this is how you want to be careful. You're right, philosophically, spiritually, it's a catalyst to seeing through things. But here it's a description of dukkha, whereas emptiness in Buddhism means the opposite. So it's just, okay. Let me give you one more. This is from someone more modern, Walt Whitman. Okay, Walt Whitman, the poet, American poet. No, people are nodding heads. We're getting closer to the contemporary. He says, this is one of his poems, "Hast never come to thee an hour?" In other words, has there never been a time that's come to you, a sudden gleam divine, a sudden like almost spiritual insight, precipitating, bursting all these bubbles. What bubbles? Now, he's not in a bubble bath, okay? He's using a metaphor. What bubbles? Fashions. Ooh. Wealth. These eager business aims. It's pretty good. So the whole fashion thing, the pursuit of wealth, all our eager business schemes. Then he says, books, politics, art, amours. What's amours?
Love.
Thank you. Love. He says, as there never come an hour when, with a sudden insight, these bubbles all burst to utter nothingness. Is his last line. Has there never come to you a moment when all of these things have just been burst into utter nothingness? And again, here nothingness is used in the same sense of Ecclesiastes, in the same sense of the meaningless, hollow, da-da-da. And again, now emptiness or nothing in the Buddhist sense means, again, the exact opposite. So it's not to say that they aren't pointing to similar types of breaking through attachments, but the language is what I'm trying to get at. So that see that what happens is, I'm not so sure, okay, we could say people with a primarily Western formation have these associations with emptiness. I'm not so sure in talking to my Asian friends that they also don't have a misunderstanding of emptiness, of sunyata, and actually misinterpreted through the same lens for different reasons. Okay? Because I know when I say to people who are Asian, now emptiness means everything is just really sucks, it's empty, it's da da da, they go. But it's actually not just one-sided here, it could be both. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because if we're going to get at the Sixth Patriarch, we really have to understand how he's using it, is to express the highest state of consciousness and awareness, the ultimate functioning of the true mind. When he says, Ban Lai Wu Yi Wu, Wu Yi Wu, we translate basically there's not one thing. We're kind of back to Ecclesiastes in a sense if we don't understand what he means. It means essentially all along we are free of even one thing. We are free of even a single thing. And that free of even a single thing means the unencumbered capacity now. Nothing's tripping us up because everything we grasp on slows and occludes. So, if you translate it, just one English word, I know openness and what, but we are free of even a single thing. It's very different than saying there's not one thing. Okay? So, that's why we're working. Okay, so that being the case, let's look at this. The first meaning of this emptiness in the Buddhist sense is referring to all phenomena lack an essential, abiding, permanent, substantial, unchanging nature. This means everything is conditioned and supported by mutual causes and conditions. So there's no phenomena that just exist, unchanging, permanent, substantial, blah, blah, blah. That's the first meaning of empty. It means empty of a self-existing nature. It's just talking about the conditioned world. Okay? Spring, seasons all depend on other causes and conditions, right? We can sit because there's a floor. The floor depends on the building depends on the earth, and the earth depends on the void. It's floating in and going, whoa, I don't feel so safe now. But it's just like conditions, right? Temperature conditions keep us healthy. Too much temperature, cold or hot, blah, blah, blah. So it's just saying everything is in a relational mode of existence depending on other things. This is also called pratitya samutpada in Buddhism. But it's just a phenomenon we know if we look at the world through almost, I would say, a scientific lens. We see an interrelationship of everything working in connection in a chain of cause and effect and continuation and da-da-da. And this is just, it doesn't have any essential nature. It's always changing. But the other meaning is, it's not just describing that, but it's also describing the emptiness of the essential nature of the Buddha nature, or our original nature, however you want to translate it, which is this wisdom, it's this joy, it's this clarity, compassion, courage. It's got all these wonderful, this is the Buddha nature effulgent. And that emptiness means, why is it that way? Because there's not one thing impeding it. So therefore, it has reached the emptiness. Okay, so that being said, I will just give some of the examples I like. maybe to point this out from the Buddhist side, maybe not from the Buddhist side, I would call this more from what we call the Quietist tradition. You know the Quietist tradition? Quietism. It's an actual term. You use it in kindergarten, get the kids to shut up. Now we're going to study Quietism. No, it's an actual spiritual, philosophical movement or persuasion that says getting a handle and insight into the nature of things and to the trueness of yourself is accomplished not by busy activity, but by stilling, by quieting. And that's where this expression comes, to the still mind, the universe surrenders. It means that in stillness and quietude, we exercise our highest capacity of mind, which is profound insight, unencumbered by discursive thinking and mediating and so forth. So it's part of the contemplative tradition, and it's rich throughout South and East Asia, and of course it has correspondence in the Western tradition too. Some of Western mysticism uses the quieting techniques. So you have, by stilling the mind and quieting your emotions, they say it's like the water that's calm and then the moon perfectly appears, not all distorted by waves. So the Quietism describes that process. It's associated with yoga and the exercise of yoga. Tai Chi is a quieting exercise. You're mellowing, chilling. So Quietism is like chilling, okay? Translate it that way. So out of the Quietist tradition comes this emphasis that if you can see where this is going, because the more quiet you are, the more you see things as they really are. The more quiet you are, the more you rest in the fullness of your own being and don't get anxious to seek outside. The more quiet you are, the more obvious things become. The contrast, they say, is when you're stirred by anxiety, then you start to go out and seek and grasp, and you get more nervous and frantic. And so these passages, there's one passage that says, there's no sign of greater evil than people should be wanting to get more. So this is a quietist expression. By not wanting to get more, having enough. Now don't go the opposite extreme and say, oh, so then I should just get rid of everything and I'll be happy. No, it's finding that balance of enough, which is zu in Chinese. Content is another way they translate it. How's my lingo? When I was a monk, there was a monk who gave me 4 characters. Let's see. Zhu Chang Le. Okay, so he wrote these 4 characters. I don't know why he gave them to me. Being a quiet person, not eager and seeking anything. At that time, I was seeking Bodhi, so he would Zhu Chang Le. Experiencing and knowing enough, always happy. So this was the 4 characters he gave me. So here, the opposite is always wanting more, big unhappiness. And disaster is not talking about, well, you could. It's very interesting. I always interpret this psychologically. Why is it we goof up? Because we don't know when to stop. Eating, sleeping, wearing clothes, drinking, traveling. Where's the, let's see, how many majors? 1 major? 2 major? Triple major? On and on and on. How many books? How many cars? So the key is not knowing to stop, but the knowing to stop is right at that, what they call the sweet spot. The sweet spot, Zhong Dao, the middle way is the sweet spot. Just enough, not too much, not too little. And having a sense of that is what Quietism is supposed to do. So by being quiet, you can kind of find where that sweet spot is and try to stay within it. By the way, it's always changing. So while I interpreted that out psychologically, just as I was sitting here, I thought, but that could be more than psychological. It could be social, and it could be environmental. The idea of not knowing, no greater evil than not knowing when to stop. No sign of disaster greater when not knowing when to stop. So you can think about, in the natural world, in the way that we're mucking up the environment, it's actually kind of talking, we don't know when to stop. When's enough? So it's interesting, people will say, well, Buddhism is kind of about contemplating your navel, doesn't concern itself with the larger world. But if you got to this point of knowing when to stop, I would suspect, at least for you and for me, we would not be messing up the world so much environmentally. Because the mad consumption of the resources is this frantic search of not knowing when to stop. Because no matter how much we get, there's never any point of enough. It's kind of a funny thing. You would think it's enough, but it's never. Okay, editorial over. So this is, in the Quietist tradition, the way this is described in terms of emptiness is that emptiness is the sought-after quality that is the fullness. And so here, this passage says, they call it learning by subtraction. And so I'll read you the passage. The passage says, learning consists in adding to one's stock day by day. You add more, you read more, you study more, you accumulate more. But the cultivation of the Tao consists of subtracting day by day. Subtracting and yet again subtracting till one has reached quietness. And by this very quiet stillness, everything can be activated. So this is a passage from the Tao Te Ching. It's a wonderful passage. It's saying, normally we think getting is adding. But here it says getting is actually letting go. So you get to the Bun Lai Wui Wu again, that idea. Okay, and then the last one I'll quote. This one I've done before, but I like it because it's more graphic. We put 30 spokes together and call it a wheel. But it is on the space where there's nothing that the usefulness of the wheel depends. Which is? I can tell we're... Any engineers here? We put the spokes together, call it a wheel. But it's where there is nothing that the usefulness depends. Oh, this sounds like a riddle. Huh, yeah. The axis, the hole in the center, then what is that thing called that goes in there? Axle goes into the hole, and then it can go around. If there wasn't there, it wouldn't be useful. I mean, it could be useful, you could play with it, but it's not going to transport you. Okay. We turn clay to make a vessel, but it's on the space where there's nothing that the usefulness of the vessel depends, right? Why is a bowl useful? Because it's empty, right? If it was full, it wouldn't be useful. So he's playing with us and saying, you think emptiness is a negative, but actually, we use it all the time. You think, wow, the emptiness in the mouth allows food to go in. That's fun. If your mouth was full, there'd be no food. On Chinese New Year, it would be a real bummer, all right? Because there's all these good foods, you wouldn't be able to eat them if your mouth was just full. We pierce doors and windows to make a house, right? And it's on these spaces where there's nothing that the usefulness of the house depends. Doors, you can come in and out of the house. The windows, you can open and let air in. So his last line is really good. Therefore, just as we take advantage of what is, we should recognize the usefulness of what is not. So I would say, ending at that passage, what the Sixth Patriarch is talking about here is the usefulness of what is not. So this emptiness he's talking about is in letting go of what is absolutely false and not true, our usefulness, our utility of our nature starts to really function. And that's why you have to take these kinds of passages to get at the positive sense of what's conveyed by emptiness here and how that would work. Okay? So I promised I'd do it. I done it. But I'll read you something. This is sort of playful. We've been studying this in another class this week, and this is called really the Shastra on the door to understanding 100 Dharmas. Okay, so a Shastra is a expository text. It's not a sutra, but it's in the tradition of sutras, and that it's explaining some key concepts. And this whole sutra starts with answering one question, or this Shastra, sorry. All dharmas are not self. What are all dharmas? And what does it mean by having no self? And then the whole thing just goes on to answer that question. Okay? But let me read you this passage. This is my teacher's commentary. He's talking about empty space. And of course, I was there at this time, so I know we were coming in with these notions of empty space as being negative or void or whatnot. And so there's a category of dharmas or phenomena which is called unconditioned empty space. Now, unconditioned empty space doesn't mean empty space out there. It's talking about a state of realization, of cultivation that comes to you at some point. So he says, you may say, well, I cultivate and have a little skill. I always sleep sitting up and I never lie down and I only eat 1 meal a day. So he's saying someone's doing in the halls thinking this. He says, but if you're still aware that you sleep sitting up and never lie down, then you still have not reached unconditioned empty space. If you still know that you eat only 1 meal a day, then you still have not reached unconditioned empty space. And if you are aware that you cultivate, then you still have not reached unconditioned empty space. That is because unconditioned empty space means your essential nature is like empty space. Your body is like empty space. What you contemplate and cultivate is truly devoid of these marks of a self and others and so forth. And when you reach that state, then if someone punched you, it gets very graphic, it would be as if they were punching empty space. Just think what it would be like to punch empty space. Empty space would not put up any resistance whatsoever. Empty space certainly would not hit back. If you can cultivate to the point of being like empty space, then nothing will be able to bother you, for you have reached totally empty space. This is the meaning of unconditioned empty space. Now he says, by the way, unconditioned empty space is extremely wonderful. I always tell you this, but you never think it very interesting, because you hear it every day. What is it that I say? I say, everything's okay, no problem. That's unconditioned. He says, if you could be really that way, everything's okay, no problem, then you would be like empty space, because empty space contains everything within it. And so on and so forth he goes. So, again, you can see, not only from the text, but in the commentary, teachers in this commentary use these analogies, metaphors, or whatnot to convey the wonderfulness of it rather than the negativity. Okay? So, if you're sleepy, go stop, go home, get some rest. Some people wrote me emails, said they wouldn't be here tonight because of Chinese New Year. I said, that's okay. Some of you are here despite Chinese New Year. I don't know, some of you thought maybe this was a Chinese New Year party. You're still waiting for it to happen. But that's where we'll stop tonight. Next week we'll continue with the text and go on a little more. But I thought maybe take some pause to go into this a little more deeply, so from now on in we have a sort of sense of the positivity. And then you can come up with suggestions for translations on these terms. I mean, we're really working on them. We struggle with them quite a bit. On Thursday night, we're working on the Hanshan text, and there again, we come across the same problems of the same terms, and how do we render them psychologically, emotionally positive, so that people see them as springboards for awareness rather than negative. And that word sunnata, empty, not one thing, keeps coming up again and again. But hopefully, we've cracked it a little tonight. Any questions? Everybody comes up afterwards and asks them. You always have good questions, but any announcements? I don't mean like marriages and babies or anything, but that's fair. Okay, I guess nothing. Nothing online? We've truly reached sunyata. We'll transfer in English. Those of you who don't know the transference, just kind of raise your hand and maybe somebody could grab the sheets in the back. Hey, every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding Li San Bao.